Hey, what's going on, guys? I have kind of a cool project for you today. We're going to be building a word translator application using the Vue.js JavaScript framework. So I discovered this API while I was creating a React Native application in a new mobile dev series that I have coming out. And I thought it was really cool, so I wanted to create a YouTube project for you guys using this API. All right, now you can implement this with React or Angular or any other framework if you want to use something else aside from Vue. I also deployed it onto my server, as you can see, with the View Cli tool. We can build out the entire thing in production in just one command. All right, so this is very simple to use. You'll see we can just type in some text here. I have hello and I have Russian selected. Now I only have 4 languages here right now, but the API it can handle like pretty much any language, I believe, so you can add more if you want. So if we click submit, it'll simply give us that word in Russian. If we want to choose Spanish, okay, or French, or whatever it may be. So very, very simple. We're using a boot swatch theme, which is just a customized bootstrap theme. All we do is point to the link and we can get this nice styling. All right. Now you will need to sign up to use this API. It's completely free, but you do need to register. So you want to go to tech.yandex.com/translate, and you'll have to create an account. You can see I'm already logged in. And then once you do that, you can click on get a free API key and put some kind of description and just check the box and submit, and you should get your key. Okay, and then you can go to this My Keys page, and you can see I already have a valid key. All right, so just get that set up before you move on. All right, so let's go ahead and open up a text editor. I'm using Atom, but you can use whatever you'd like. And then we also want to open up a command line or terminal. I'm using Windows for this project, and I'm using a tool called Commander, which I made a video on. It's really cool. It's a nice replacement for PowerShell or the Windows command line. And what we need to do first is install the Vue CLI, okay, which is the command line interface, and that allows us to generate a boilerplate application. So you want to just npm install. Now you need to have Node.js installed. So if you don't have that, just go to nodejs.org and download and install it. All right, and then we want to add the -g because we're installing it globally, and then Vue-CLI. And that'll get the command line interface set up on your machine. All right, and I can pull up the GitHub page for that. Oops, that's not right. Okay, so here it is, and you'll see that we're doing this right now. And then when we want to create an application, we can do Vue init, and we want to choose Webpack for our template, and then my project, whatever we want to call the project. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll say Vue init Webpack, and let's call this Word Translator. And that'll initialize a new project. We have to answer a couple questions. Project name, that's fine. Description, let's just say simple translator application. Author, that's fine. Enter. Install Vue router. We're not going to use the router, but I'm going to just install it anyway. ESLint, I'm not going to install that, so I'll say no. We're not doing any testing, so I don't want to install Karma. End-to-end testing, no. And now that should be generated. So let's cd into Word Translator. And from here, we need to install our dependencies by doing npm install. All right, and I'm just going to open the folder up in Atom. See, we want to go to projects, Word Translator. All right, now if you're using Atom, you definitely want to install the Vue.js plugin, because if you don't, you're not going to have the proper highlighting. So to do that, you just want to go to settings and just go down to install, search for Vue, and then you just want to install this language-Vue. Okay, just go ahead and click install, and then you should have highlighting and all that. All right, so let's see what's going on here. So now that's generated. And there's only one other dependency that I want to install, and that's View resource. We're going to use that to make our HTTP requests. So you just want to do npm install view-resource and -- save. And then we should be all set to start up our application. All right. So now we should be able to do npm run dev, and that'll run our development server. Okay, and it's going to start it on port 8080, I believe. Yep. And this is basically just the boilerplate. All right, so let's go into our folder, our directory here, and we're going to be working in the source, the src folder. You can see we have our main.js file, which brings in Vue and all that stuff. We also have our app.vue, which is the main component, and then we have a components folder where we'll put all of our subcomponents. By default, there's one called hello.vue. Now, if you haven't watched my Vue.js in 60 minutes video, I would suggest watching that before this, because I go over pretty much, everything, every line of code. In this, I'm not going to. This is going to be more of a demo, so I'm not going to explain every single little thing. So if you don't know anything about Vue.js, I would definitely suggest watching that video first. Alright, so let's create our component files that we're going to need. We're basically going to have two components. One's going to be the translate form, which will have the text input and the language select, and then we'll also have a component called translate output, which will be the translated text. So let's say new file, and we're going to say translate form .view, and then we'll create another file called translate output.view. Okay, so those are the two components we'll be using. Now we're going to open up our app.view, which is basically the core component, the main app component, and we're going to get rid of these styles here. Okay, and let's get rid of this logo. And also, we're not using the router, so I'm going to get rid of that as well. And for now, let's just put an H1 here, and we'll say Word Translator. All right, and let's just save that, make sure it's still working. Good. And then actually we'll have a H5 underneath. I'm not going to add the styles until later, the bootstrap and all that, all the classes. And this is just going to say powered by Vue.js. Okay, and then under that is where we're going to have our two components. So let's say translate form. And let's add the closing tag. Okay, now we have to bring this in to be able to use it. We have to import it. So we're going to go right under the script tag and say import translate form, and that's going to be from, actually I'm not going to use semicolon, that's going to be from /components/ translate form. Okay, so that'll bring it in. Now we also have to add it to our object down here. So right under the name, let's put in components, and we're going to set this to an object, and we're going to add translate form. All right, so let's save that, and then we'll go to our translate form. Actually, what I'll do is copy everything in this file and paste it in there. Okay, we're just going to change this ID to translate form, and for now let's just put some text in here. Okay, and we don't need this import, and we're going to change this, I'm sorry, not that, we're going to change this right here to translate form. Okay, we can get rid of this components, we don't need that, and get rid of this app ID, and save, and we should be able to output that. Okay, you can see right here. Now I'm going to open up my dev tools here. Let's just reload. Okay, so we have no errors. So we're outputting the component, and what I want to do here is just add in a form. Okay, so let's actually give this form an ID, And actually, no, we don't need an ID for that. What we do need is an event handler. So basically, when we submit this form, we want to call a function called form submit. So in Vue, what we need to do is add this v-on when we want to define an event handler, and the actual event type, which is going to be a submit, and then we want to set that to form submit, which will be a function that we create, or a method. Now in here, we're going to put our input. So this will be input type text, and we're going to give this an attribute of v-model, and what that will do is it'll bind this input to one of our component properties, okay, which is going to be the text to translate property. So in here we want to set this to text to translate. All right, and then we'll just add a placeholder as well. Okay, we'll just say translate, oh no, enter a word. All right, so there's our text input. Now we're going to need a select list for the language, but I'm not going to do that just yet. I want to do that after we actually make it so that we can make our request and all that, just to kind of keep things simple. All right, so what I'll do now is add the submit button. So we're going to say input type, and that's going to be submit. And let's see, we're going to just give it a value of submit. All right, actually, let's give it a value of translate. Okay, so if we save that, we're getting this error down here because we haven't created form submit. Also, text to translate has not been defined. If you're going to use vModel and bind to a property, you need to actually add that property. Okay, so what we'll do is we're going to go right under name and say data, and this is where we can define our component data or properties. Okay, and you have to actually return. So let's say return an object, and we're going to add text to translate. Okay, and by default that's going to be just nothing. So we're binding this input to this by adding the vModel. Okay, if you're familiar with Angular and not Vue, this is similar to ngModel and Angular. Alright, so now we want to create this form submit function, and to do that we have to go under data and define methods. Okay, and in methods we're going to have one called form submit, and a function and a method is pretty much the same thing in this case. Alright, now since we're submitting a form, we're going to pass along e and then say e.prevent default, because that's going to prevent it from actually submitting to a web page. Alright, and then what we want to do in here, first of all, let's just test it out by doing an alert. So we'll say alert submitted, and let's go ahead and reload this, and then just put whatever, translate, and we get submitted. So we know that that's calling the correct method. Alright, now since this input is bound to this property, we should be able to access that. So let's actually alert that. So if we say alert this dot text to translate, then it should alert with whatever we type in here. Okay, and it's doing that. Now we need to basically take the text that we put in here in this component and send it up to the app.view component. Okay, so the way that we can do that is by using emit. Okay, we can emit a value from this component. Okay, if we look in our app.view file, we can emit something from this into our main app component, because that's where we want to do the actual HTTP request and all that. We don't want to do that in the form component. So what we'll do is get rid of this alert, and we can say this dot $emit, and add some parentheses, and then we want to emit form submit. Okay, and you can call emit whatever you want. You can call it whatever you want, but I think that makes sense. So we'll do that, and then we also want to send along the text to translate, which is the input text. So right here we're going to say this dot text to translate. Okay, so that'll emit that value. So let's save this, and then we're going to go into app.view, and then go to that component, the translate form component, and we just want to add in an attribute called vOn. Okay, so we want to say vOn and then form submit, because that's what we're emitting. And then when we emit that, we want to run a function called translate text. Whoops. Okay, so when form submit is emitted, it's going to run this function. So let's create this function down here, or this method, whatever you want to call it. So we're going to go after components and then add a methods here. Okay, and we want translate text. Actually, we're going to do colon and then function. Okay, and then this here is going to take in a parameter which we'll call text, and that pertains to this right here. Okay, because we're emitting it and then we're passing along this value which we can catch right here. So let's just do an alert here and make sure that that's not only being called but that this value is being passed. So we'll reload and let's just say test, click it, and we get alert tests. So now this is running and it's passed in that data. So this is where we actually want to make our HTTP request to the Yandex API. All right, let's see, let's go to let's see, documentation. All right, so these are all actually all the languages that you can use along with the code. You need to use the language code. And then if we go down to translate text, what we have to do is make a request to this URL. Okay, then we have to add a couple parameters. We have to add a key parameter where we'll put the API key, and then text, which will be the text to translate, and then lang, which will be the language we want to translate to. All right, so that's what we're going to do here, is make that request. Now, in order to make the request, we need to use Vue resource, which we installed a little while ago, and we need to actually bring that in. So let's go to main.js, and we're just going to go right here and say import Vue resource from Vue-resource. And you don't have to use this. You can use Axios or just jQuery or anything that can make requests. And then we just need to enable it or add it to the middleware. So we want to say Vue.use and pass in that Vue resource. All right, and if you want to look at the documentation for that, okay, so let's see. Basically, what we can do is say this dot $HTTP dot, and then whatever type of request. In our case, it's going to be get, and then that URL. Okay, and then it's going to pass us back a promise, and we're going to access the response and do what we want with the response. So make sure this is saved, and then close that up. All right, and then we're going to make our request. So we'll do this dot $HTTP dot get, and then we want to put in our endpoint. So we're going to go back here and grab this, copy that, paste that in. All right, and then we need to add our parameters. So we're going to put a question mark and then key equals, and then this is where we need to put the API key. So I'm going to grab that. Let's see, right here, API key, and then my keys, and I'm going to grab this, copy, and then we'll just paste it in here. And I actually want to wrap this so you guys can see. Let's see, toggle soft wrap, there we go. All right, so we have the key parameter. Now we need the language. So we're going to put an ampersand and then lang equals. And for now, I'm just going to hard code this as Russian. So we need RU, which is the code. and then we need to do the actual text we want translated. So we're going to do ampersand text equals, and then we want this value here. So we'll just concatenate on text, and that should make our request. Alright, now this is asynchronous, and it's going to give us a promise back, so we need to go on to the end here, get rid of that semicolon, and I'm going to go on to a new line and say .then. Okay, and in here we'll put in an arrow function with the parameter of response, and then we should be able to access that response. So let's just do a console log. Okay, so let's save that, and hopefully this works. So let's see, I'm just going to reload this, and let's put in the word hello and then translate, and there it is. There's our response. Okay, so in this response we have a body object. If we look at that, we have the code of 200, which means everything's okay. Our language, and then the language we're translating, and then text, which has an array. Now it returns an array because I think that sometimes you can get more than one result for one word, but I'm not going to get into that. What we're going to do is just grab the first one. As you can see, there's only one here, and it has an index of 0. So if we say console.log response.body.text and then use 0 as our index, let's try it again, and there it is. There's the translation. Okay. Now what we want to do with that translation is put it into a property called translated text. So what I'll do is add right here data. No, that's not right. Data and then function. And remember, we have to return. And then we're going to say translated text, which will initially be set to nothing. Okay, but then once we make the request, we're going to put our response into that value. So this dot translated text equals that. Okay. And then what we want to do is take our translate output component and have that output the text. So let's go up here, and we're gonna need to import that as well. Translate output, and let's see, that's going to be from /components/translate output. Okay, we also have to add it to our list of components, and then we're going to put that right here. Translate output. Just like that. And we need to pass in the translated text right here. So we can do that easily by using the vtext directive and just set that equal to translated text. And that should pass that along. So let's go ahead and save this, and then we're going to create the translate output component. So what I'll do is just copy what we have in translate form and then paste it in translate output. Alright, and then we're going to change up some things here. As far as the template, all I want it to be is an H2. So let's get rid of that and just put in an H2. And then we can access the translated text that we passed in by using a double curly brace. And say translated text. Okay, and then let's see, down here, all we want is a name, which is going to be translate output. And in order to grab this translated text that was passed in, we need to define it as a property. So right here, we're going to say props, and then set that to set up brackets, and then translated text. And then we can get rid of this stuff, the data, no methods. Very, very simple component. Okay, we'll save that. And let's reload this. Let's see, what are we getting here? Oh, let's go back to app.view. There needs to be a comma right here. There we go. So, hello, translate, and there we go. Okay, so it's now translating to Russian. Now what we want to do is have the language selector, because we want to be able to select a couple different languages. So let's go back to translate form, go up to where we have our markup, and we're going to put a select right here. Okay, this select is going to be bound to a property called language, so let's add that down here in the data. So we just want to do language and just set that to nothing, and then up here for the select we're going to add a v model and set that to language. Okay, and then we're going to put in our options. So let's say option value. Okay, this one's going to be Russian, and that's going to have the code of RU. Okay, and then I'm just going to copy this, and we'll put Spanish, which I believe is ES, and French, which is FR, and then Chinese. Let me see. I think I don't remember that, so I'm going to go to the documentation overview, and this is where you can find all the different codes. Let's see, where's Chinese? Chinese looks like it's ZH. Okay, and you can put all of these language if you want, but that's good for now. So we want to have Russian selected by default. So what we can do is we can create a lifecycle method, which is basically just a method that hooks into a certain point and runs at that point. So we want this to run when the component's created, so we can use the created lifecycle function or lifecycle method. Make sure you put a comma there as well. And then all we're going to do is say this.language equals RU. Okay, that's going to be the default value. And then it'll change whenever we make our selection. Now, we also need to pass the language that we select here. We have to pass that to the parent component, just like we did here with the text to translate. So what we'll do is just add another parameter here and say this.language. Alright, and that should do it. Let's save it and then go back to our app.view, and we need to add that here as well, language. And then we're going to replace the hard-coded RU right here with that language. So let's just put in some quotes, and we're going to concatenate language. And that should do it. So let's save and go back to our application. Okay, so we'll say hello, and let's choose Spanish, translate, and there we go. So that's working. So the functionality is now complete. So what we're going to do now is make this look a lot better, because it looks horrible right now. So I'm going to use Bootswatch, which you guys have seen me use quite a bit. I like it because, one, it's easy to link. We can just add the link, and then it's also different looking than the standard Bootstrap. So we're going to use this paper one right here. I'm going to click download and then just grab this link. Alright, we'll put this in index.html. Let's actually change this title to Word Translator. Okay, and then we're just going to add a link. rel equals style sheet. href. Paste that in. Alright, and then we'll save that. Okay, so that looks a little better. Now we're going to have to go around and add our classes that we need. So let's start in app.view. I want these headings to be centered, so let's add a class to them called text center, which is a Bootstrap class. Actually, you know what? Let's just add it to the div. Save that, and now everything's centered. So now I just want to go down to our styles down here and just change that to body. And let's add background, which will be FE 3 times. All right. Let's see. So now we're going to move on to the form. So let's go to the translate form component and go up to where we have the HTML. And we're going to add, let's see, we're actually going to add a class here called row. What I want to do is use the grid system and make this into a 6-column row or a 6-column div, but also add an offset so it's in the middle. All right. Now this is in the middle, but I want to put a class of well around the form to give it a gray background. And I'll show you what happens if we do that. So if we say class equals well, okay, now, and you can see it goes all the way over. I want it to be in the middle here. So what we'll do is put another div right here, and let's give it a class of call MD, call MD6, and then call MD offset, and we want to offset it 3. Okay, and we'll put that ending div. All right. So now if we save, you'll see it's pushed into the middle. Okay, now for the inputs, we're going to put a class here of form control on that, and also on the select. And then on the input, the submit button down here, we're going to give it a class of BTN and then BTN primary. Save that. Why does it look like that? I'm not exactly sure why it looks different from my other one, but I don't care. That looks fine. You guys can style this however you want. I'm just going to put a line break above the button. All right. And let's also make this, I want to give this a rounded edge and also a border. So let's go down here. And actually, let's give does the form have an ID? No, it doesn't. So let's give it an ID of transform. And then down here. And we're just going to give it a border radius. Let's do 10 pixels, and then border, we'll do 1 pixel, gray, and solid. There we go. Oh, you know what? I didn't make it inline, that's why. So let's give the form a class also of form inline. There we go. And I don't want that line break. If you guys like the other way, by all means, keep it. Okay, so the last thing we want to do is on translate output. I want it to be green, so we're going to add a class of text-success, which will make it green. So let's try it out. There we go. Awesome. And then the last thing we're going to want to do is build this out for production. So we're going to go back to the command line here. And let's see, we're going to stop the project, Control C, and then we're just going to do npm run build. And that'll actually build it out for us. Okay, let's go into the folder. And let's see, we want to go to projects and word translator, and you should have a dist folder, and inside there you'll have a folder called static and an index.html. Now if you're putting this in a subdomain or a subfolder on your host, what you're going to want to do is just edit this real quick and just take the first slash off of everywhere where it says static. All right, let me see. Let's wrap this. All right, so right here, here, because it's not going to be able to find the files if you leave that there. And I think that's it. So let's save that. And then what I'll do is open up FileZilla. Okay, and let me just connect real quick here. And then I'm going to go to Demos, Word Translator. And that's what you're seeing here, which is what I already had. What I'll do is delete this completely. And reload this, and you can see there's nothing there. So now we'll take the stuff that's in the dist folder and bring it over. Let that upload. Okay, and then we'll go back and reload. There it is. We'll say hello, translate. Okay, and we now have a production Vue.js application. Alright, so hopefully you guys like this. Now, if you want to learn more about Vue.js, I would definitely suggest looking into my Eduonics Vue.js course. I'll leave a link in the description. If you're not subscribed, please do so. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like. And that's it. Thanks for watching.